next section, what I would like to do is explore a little bit more in depth the relationship between problem management and the rest of the service life cycle. Where proactive problem management sits is slightly different than where we see the reactive side of problem management. Reactive side is very customer focused, right? We're still dealing with this influx of incidents coming in. We have these tight SLAs that we're trying to adhere to in order to get a root cause identified and to get it out of the environment in order to affect change. Proactive, we have a little bit more time. We can do this analysis on a part-time basis, not on a full-time basis. And the processes that we work with are going to be different than what we might work with when we're primarily dealing with incident management and change management. So the key relationships, definitely with incident management. Here's where we're identifying problems, giving the workarounds to incident management, and then all that communication that we saw in the problem management process, those are all the key interfaces where we give information back to incident management that empowers them to restore the service. There is no doubt that those two processes are more closely integrated than probably any other two processes in the framework, with the exception of maybe change and release. A very close relationship there. Once the problem has been identified and we have a potential fix for this, then we see problem management reaching out to change management with the main objective of saying, here's what needs to be changed. We need you to vet this out and get this through the next change cycle so that we can affect a permanent resolution within the environment. So the relationship there is basically the trigger of sending them an RFC, but then we have to patiently wait while that change goes through the change management process before it's been implemented and we get that feedback that we need of whether or not it successfully restored service to the environment or eliminated that root cause. So not as close of a relationship, but a strong dependency on creating quality when we talk about the connection to change management. The other key relationship here is with config. Now, you can imagine, let's say I'm a server person, and I'm proactively looking at the performance of the server. I'm going to look at log files. These are probably things that are captured in event management. I'm going to be looking at incidents within incident management, problems within problem management. I'm going to look at all the history of the requests for change that are occurring. I may go out to the vendor's website and begin looking around there to see if there's anything that I should be aware of. But where we get the power of all of that data is when we see the relationships between things. And this predominantly comes from the configuration management system. When I look at the data in isolation, I'm only seeing part of the picture. When I see it as it relates to the whole performance of that configuration item, I get a much better view and can fine-tune and look into where problems may actually be occurring. Now here's what is known as the expanded incident management cycle. So we're going from the error in the infrastructure, that begins to create incidents in the environment. A whole bunch of customers call in. Then that means we open up a problem ticket. Now, the incidents are still coming, right? We still have a ton of incidents coming in, but we have one problem ticket that we begin doing the diagnostics on. Once we identify the known error goes into the known error database and immediately comes available back here to incident management. So all of those incidents that are occurring, we can apply that restoration and get rid of. Then, once we have provided that workaround, we continue to go forward identifying what's the corrective action. We submit the RFC, and then once it goes through, we have structural resolution. Now, you'll notice that what's happening between incident and problem is a lot more complex than this linear, right? Because incident management starts along this path, but it never stops. We're continually working with the customer. We identify the problem, that's the trigger. The problem management process begins down its path of activities. It finds a potential workaround from incident management. We provide it to problem. When problem identifies the right one, it goes up here and it's stored into the known error database. So we kind of see these two things are running in parallel, and we see how the inputs and outputs are actually being shared, you know, across different times within each of those processes. So it's much more dynamic than what this linear one would suggest down here at the bottom. Okay? That's just from incident to problem. Now we begin to bring in change management. Again, we see incident and problem management running in parallel, but while we're still restoring service back up here, we still have incidents recurring. We're restoring it with the temporary fix, while change management is working on getting rid of the issue altogether. So again, everything is still all running at the same time, waiting patiently for change management to go through the work that needs to be done in order to eliminate that error. So much more dynamic, not as linear as we might think when we look at the simple process flows that are just provided to us within the guidelines of ITIL. Also, here we can see there's a flow going through problem management all the way down to change management and back up, driven by not just what comes from incident management, but we can also add the complexity of all of this data coming to us also from event management. So you can imagine having two pipes now where data is coming in about what are the incidents that are occurring in the environment, how that's impacting the performance of configuration items coming from event management. So we need to effectively, within problem management, bring in the data coming from the customer as well as from event management into that picture where we begin analyzing it. And again, we still see the same layers of incident working with problem, working with change. We've added event management into that picture. Now, the proactive side is going to be much more focused on providing information to processes within service design. And here's kind of where we're going to be going from here. When we look at reactive problem management, it's mostly in service operations. We wait for the incident to occur, we do some trend analysis, we put something into transition, and then it loops back to operations. But we're pretty much staying in the tactical and operational aspects of delivering and supporting that service. The proactive side is going to be looking for long-term solutions that prevent things from occurring. So eliminating single points of failure, improving performance, load balancing, all these much more what I would consider extensive types of continuous improvement that are meant to sustain the service long term. What that means is we're sharing information with the planning side of capacity management. Capacity management is in service design. It's something that we're supposed to design the service to have a sufficient capacity to meet the needs of the business today and in the future. But in order to understand how well we did in the design, we have to pay attention to capacity in the operational environment. So what we're doing is we're trending and we're looking for the identification of anything that could go wrong around capacity. Guess who does that? Problem management, and they do that proactively, and they provide that information back to capacity management. Service level management is looking at the performance of services as it relates to the agreements that we have and the targets in those agreements. So although that's done, again, in design, this is what the business would like us to have, design the service to meet this. Once it gets into the operational environment, we're often identifying where we meet customer expectations and where there are gaps in between what the customer wanted and what we provide. So again, proactive problem management is feeding back into service level management potential improvements that would enable us to better match that service's performance with those targets that we agreed upon within service level management process and design. Availability management also has operational type of activities, right? If we design a service for 5 nines availability, and once it gets into the live environment, we realize we're only delivering 3 nines availability, that's a significant difference. So we're investigating and we're discovering the reasons why the service isn't necessarily down. we are proactively looking at ways to improve that service. So the advanced proactive problem management is really feeding back into availability management. So where we see reactive problem management sit is more in the strategic long-term development of products and services within the environment, getting the operational data into the hands of the people that are making the decisions around the design and long-term architecture in order to make the right decisions on how to permanently improve the performance of services in the live environment. So there's much more of a strategic nature of what we're feeding in from proactive problem management than there is when we see just the linkage between incident and event and change that are happening within the reactive side of problem management. So here's a little bit more around the description of the relationships between problem management and some of the service design processes. So here we see availability. We're providing information around problems related to availability, but we're also monitoring and getting data that will help to identify where we have single points of failure or performance issues around availability in order to proactively improve availability management. Capacity management, when we're designing, we use data from the operational environment to hypothetically simulate the capacity requirements of a service. When it gets into the live environment, we're identifying problems related to capacity and proactively trying to eliminate capacity-related problems in the live environment. So we do see a significant, service level management is also in design, and here's where we're identifying structural improvements long-term that will help to increase the overall quality of the services that we provide. So it's a unique position. Where we see reactive is much more in operations, where we see proactive is much more feeding a much more formalized life cycle approach to delivering the services that we provide. So a lot more value add when we can improve things long term, when it's kind of like the forest through the trees, right? We're really not focused on the low-hanging fruit, but beginning to see the big picture and how if we make changes in the big picture, we're more likely to impact the day-to-day operational of that service. And I just put this in here just to kind of help us to understand that there are agreements that are driven by service level management that also help us to share that information amongst the different shareholders of information or stakeholders of information in the service life cycle. So the service level agreement is really gets those requirements from the business. That feeds in to know what our services should be doing. The operational agreement is the way that we work internally together. That helps us to build those relationships so that when I begin to provide you information when a service could be potentially failing, we have an agreement of how we'll work together to help to manage that situation in order to prevent something from occurring. The underpinning contracts with external suppliers really help to build that relationship where we're sharing information around the products and services that our vendors provide to us, gives us visibility into their operational environment in order to help us prevent things from becoming an issue within our own environment. So not only is this a conduit of information, but anytime we identify a service improvement opportunity, we're sharing that across these different conduits, these different stakeholder groups, in order to work together to successfully identify what's the best option that will provide the highest level of value for the least amount of cost. So we still are always, again, prioritizing what we're doing in proactive problem management in order to drive the greatest value for least expensive expenditures. Naturally, this leads us to the connection with continual service improvement. If I am proactively studying things that are going on in the environment, I'm going to be doing more than just trend analysis. And there are lots of different quality management techniques that CSI brings to the table that we don't necessarily have in operations. We can look at things like from Six Sigma, addressing process-related issues, identifying errors in order to eliminate errors within processes. We can use techniques like a component failure impact analysis, where if this component fails, how does that impact the rest of the service, and what is the potential long-term implication of that failure? And so maybe we decide that the impact of that is too great, so we decide to create redundancy and eliminate that single point of failure. But we can't do that until we look hypothetically at that service and do all the what-ifs. So there are lots of different techniques that CSI brings to the table that they are the subject matter experts at applying, that we can leverage those techniques using our data in order to effectively help to proactively eliminate things before they occur. So not only are they giving us the methods, they help us to also prioritize those improvement opportunities so that we're focused on doing the things that make the most sense for the business.